Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. And today, as I stated in the previous video, I'll be doing a more fun video. Now, this video is gonna be about it's gonna be really about alternate history. So yeah, it may be a bit more complex for you, but I'll try explaining it as best as I can. So basically, this is what if BRICS existed in a mostly Western world. Now, I'm gonna explain to you what BRICS is. Now, here I have this map up. Now, this is the normal map, of IRL, so real life, OTL or timeline. BRICS is basically an economic, so I'm making this clear, economic, okay? Not military. It's an economic alliance between, now BRICS means the initial of the following countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Then in some of the recent years, other countries joined this economic alliance as well, such as Iran, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, and also Indonesia actually joined it. And also Saudi Arabia is interesting because they are kinda are a BRICS member, but at the same time they haven't joined yet. Saudi Arabia is pretty interesting. So yeah, so this is, the BRICS. So it's an economic alliance, not a military one, but in this scenario, we'll be looking at like if BRICS actually was sort of a military alliance as well and then went to war with NATO. I mean, I know I break down BRICS versus NATO, but I promise you it's gonna be different because we are not gonna be using the ultimate map, because if you remember I remembered in the BRICS video that I did at April, I didn't consider Saudi Arabia a BRICS member. I already knew about the fact that Saudi Arabia is a BRICS member, but it's simply not really. Just in this case, I decided to do it in the way that really only the countries that are really 100% BRICS member, and Saudi Arabia obviously doesn't really belong to get to that category. But in this scenario, yes, I'm gonna be considering Saudi Arabia as a BRICS member. I think it will actually make it interesting for what I plan to make happen in the scenario I'm about to do. Once again, we are not gonna be using the LTL map. We're gonna be using this map, okay? As you can see, there are some changes on the borders, but actually most of the changes are like just in the governments that obviously, as I said, are more uh, pro-Western. For example, here you can see that there's no Korean DMZ border here, and obviously this is a pro-Western Korea. A Western Korea, it's the Republic of Korea that controls all of the Korean Peninsula. Then you can imagine that it's a democratic Vietnam and not the communist Vietnam. And also here, the situation here in Israel is interesting. It actually has to do with what happened in the Arab world in this island instead. And also, Africa doesn't really look that different, but once again, like some countries do get more progressive governments, or some countries don't really have any civil wars to destroy their countries. And also, the situation here in Latin America is really interesting. Now, but there are some countries that are still pro-Eastern, and these countries are Russia and China. And that's sort of it. But once again, Russia does still have some of their allies, such as Serbia, um, Armenia. Yeah, I know that OTO, Russia has kind of lost Armenia as an ally. In this case, Russia never really invaded Ukraine. In this case, Ukraine is kind of left alone doing its own thing. Yeah, they still they still are leaning towards the West, but they still do keep some relations with Russia. So yeah, so in this case, the relations between the West and Russia are kind of better, since Russia never attacked Ukraine, so no sanctions, and trade still keeps flowing. Also, in this scenario, Belarus is democratic along with the West, same thing for Kazakhstan and most of Central Asia. Also, Iran, they don't have the Islamic regime. In this case, they still are a monarchy aligned with the West. Also, a constitutional monarchy, a reform monarchy. Same thing for guys, and they kept their monarchy, so they are a lot better off in comparison to OTL. In this case, the Kashmir thing is kind of settled between Pakistan and India. Basically, when the two countries formed, like after World War II, when Britain has the brilliant idea of partitioning the British Raj, in this case, Kashmir, instead of choosing to join India, they choose to join Pakistan, and India accepts it. So in this case, There are still religious differences between Pakistan and India, obviously. There may still be an exodus, but the relationship between the two countries are definitely better off, I guess. Also, Mongolia is between Russia and China, so yes, they still are friendly towards these countries. Oh, and of course, Russia is still ally with India, and India still hates China, obviously. But anyways, I was saying that without Russia invading Ukraine, and also because in this case there wasn't really any war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, because this Azerbaijan managed to secure control of this area very quickly, like even before the 21st century came, like immediately after the USSR collapsed in this timeline, which obviously still happened in this timeline. I mean, if we still have these wars, it obviously still happened. But in this case, like Armenia, you know, that means that the incident, that happened back at the late 2022, with the border here between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Armenia never really arrives to think that Russia may not really care about them. So Armenia does say in the CSTO, and they still are allied with Russia. So yeah. So we are gonna see how BRICS is in this alternate timeline. Also, is it recording? Yes, it is recording. Now, BRICS, how it's gonna be in this timeline? Now, BRICS, they're still gonna have Russia, obviously, as well as China. They're still gonna have Brazil, obviously, South Africa, and India. So yeah, so the core members are intact, but we're gonna see if there's gonna be the exact same number, of other members. And also, I actually plan on making a different version of this video as well. Um, where I'll be doing a different technique instead, because I feel like you can do alternate history in multiple ways. In this case, I'm choosing a certain way. The next video, I'll maybe choosing a different way. Anyways, yes. Wait, I'm coloring all this. Wait, and then obviously we need to consider India. Okay. So once again, these are your core BRICS members, but we're gonna see in this case there are other countries who are with BRICS. Now, Iran, they kept their monarchy, okay, so they're more aligned with the West. They still have, but they also are kind of non-aligned, so they do have some relations with Russia and China, but like less closer than OTO. So in this case, Iran didn't actually join BRICS, but Saudi Arabia and the UAE still did. Now, I'm gonna consider once again Saudi Arabia as a BRICS member in this scenario, and I know that Saudi Arabia and the UAE, I know that Iran will kind of be doing the same thing that Saudi Arabia and the UAE though do in OTO, which is being a Western ally, but at the same time keeping its relations with Russia and China. But I feel like that Iran will be more pro-Western than these countries, I should say. Okay. Now in this case, once again, Egypt and Ethiopia, just like Iran, more pro-Western, but they're also not aligned, but still more pro-Western to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So they're not gonna join. They're not gonna be joining BRICS in this alternate timeline. So yeah, so now it remains this country, Indonesia. Indonesia, they're still gonna join. Indonesia joined BRICS because they do have ties with China and India, which I believe India still is gonna have these ties in this timeline. So yeah, so Indonesia is still a BRICS member in this alternate 2026. Actually, the world will be a lot better off in this alternate 2026. Ironically, with most of the world being pro-Western, I actually have to talk about the economic implications of this, because once again, there's still Russia and China to counter, the global liberal Western order. But like once again, uh, we don't have any pro-Western regimes in countries such as Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. In this case, they are democracies, and they're actually better off. Cuba actually has more of a not really democracy, but like more of a social democracy. Like the Cuban Revolution in that case wasn't really an authoritarian communist one, but instead, with the support of the US, actually adopted a more social democratic view. But once again, the people there are still better off. Here, actually, in the Middle East and the North Africa, a lot of the Arab monarchies that were actually in place, before the current governments that we see in the Arab world, never got overthrown. By keeping the monarchies, they use the stability that countries such as Morocco and the Gulf countries have. So that means that, they can reform slowly, not like quickly, and they're also using, the money, like in a better way, to invest in reforms, healthcare, to make people's lives better. Now, once again, like it's still not gonna be perfect, such as North America and Europe. So like we see Morocco recently, like there's still gonna be economic issues, some poverty issues, but definitely a lot better off, and ironically, a lot more democratic in comparison to OTO. Like instead of like authoritarian, maybe more of a hybrid regime, which once again actually Morocco, despite its current situation until, it's actually a pretty great example because they're actually the most liberal out of the Arab countries and out of the Arab monarchies. So I guess that if countries like Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Iraq kept their monarchies, I think they could have become liberal like Morocco, or even more liberal than Morocco. Like Egypt, at the time where they had the monarchy, it was actually considered one of the most liberal Arab countries. Same thing also for sort of Iraq. Also Jordan today after Morocco is the second most liberal like Arab monarchy after Morocco. So I want to, and also Iraq had the same monarchy dynasty as Jordan, the Hashemites. I guess it's called, yes, the Hashemites. I hope I pronounced it well. So once again, there will be that connection. I would say the connection will be, make these two countries close together. So yeah, so with ironically enough, with a lot of countries that turning like mm, their pro-Western monarchy governments, they're actually a lot better off. Once again, also here there's North Korea, Vietnam is democratic, and integrated into the capital system a lot earlier than OTO. So yeah, so really, it's actually ironically a better world. And of course, there are no wars in the Middle East. In this case, here in Lebanon are democracies. In this case, the Palestinian thing is settled, because without the Arab Republics, without the Arab republics of Egypt, Syria wanting to go to war against Israel. Israel never really does anything, so this parts here remain part of Gaza remains part of Egypt. The West Bank remains part of Jordan, so the people there live in peace, and also Israel doesn't really have to worry about any threats in this timeline. So once again, it's really a better world for a lot of people. And of course, there's no Russian invasion of Ukraine, so there's no threat of World War III, and there's no threat of sanctions. That shit will obviously still be there, but a lot lower in comparison to OTO. And there are obviously also some other changes I will really address, but we'll be getting there in a second, eventually, I guess. Anyways, at this point we are gonna be considering another BRICS member. Now, I don't know how many people know about the Argentina thing. I do. Basically, in late 2023, and here I'm saying it OTO, so not this time, I'm saying it OTO, or timeline world. BRICS membership applications were given to Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Argentina. All of the countries except Argentina accepted to join. Argentina eventually refused. I'm going to explain why. In OTO, when the membership application was given to Argentina as well, also for the other 5 countries I mentioned, Argentina had a left-leaning government that was more in favor, of course they keep ties with the West, but they were more in favor of also cultivating ties with Eastern powers such as Russia, China. But then before the Argentina could join BRICS, they had the election in which the right-wing guy, the very pro-American and not really pro these guys got elected, and eventually Argentina refused to join BRICS. And here it's gonna be different. Once again, I'm gonna mention here Venezuela. In this case, Venezuela never really got that communist socialist dictatorship. They got their democratic government, and actually because with the Cuban Revolution not really being communist but social democratic, we really don't really have any other like pro-Soviet revolutions happening in these areas. So once again, Venezuela keeps their democratic government, and today they are better off. And actually, the Venezuelan crisis really contributed to a lot of countries voting to choose right, especially in the late 2010s, in the early 2020s, and it's still going on to this day. And with Venezuela keeping their democratic government, and there's not gonna be any Venezuelan crisis, so people in Latin America may have more trust on the left. In fact, most of the countries may actually be left-wing in this sideline. I could also consider that even without the Venezuelan crisis, there were still issues that will still make some of these countries vote right eventually. In this case, I'm gonna be going by the assumption that without the crisis in Venezuela, a lot more Latin American countries, a lot more Latin American countries will be left-leaning, of course, in a democratic way. So that means that in this case, Argentina never turned right-wing. So in this case, Argentina keeps their left-wing government either by the president they already had, or a successor of him. And in this case, Argentina will have joined BRICS in this timeline. Yeah, some people say that it. Okay, I don't really know how to speak English. Actually, I know how to speak English. It's just that I don't want this video to be long because then nobody's really gonna watch it. I know that I really shouldn't care, but like I'm trying to be entertaining. I mean, we haven't really gotten to the war stuff yet, but stick with me. It's gonna be fun, okay? So in this case, Argentina will have joined BRICS. Now, some people say that it would have been better if Argentina had joined BRICS. I'm not really gonna say any statements, but I mean, it's an economic alliance. Joining economic alliance does in general benefit the country that is joining said economic alliance. So yeah, I'm not really gonna say anything there. But yeah, in this case, this is the BRIC alliance in this tournament, and also actually with a lot of these governments being left leaning, they kind of want to not really beat that pro US, so there may actually be a lot more of these countries, interested in partnerships with the BRICS alliance. So yeah, anyways, we're gonna start the war with NATO. Now NATO is gonna be fairly the same amount as OTL, but there are gonna be some differences. They do have to do, with the differences in this timeline, in this alternate world map. So yeah, once again, we still have the. Now, I'm not really sure the US will set up that same OTL leader. I'm not really gonna consider it there because once again, it doesn't really matter what leader the US have. They're still gonna be doing their usual stuff. Of course, Western Europe is still gonna be NATO. That obviously still happens. So yeah, once again, all these countries are with NATO. Same thing also for Denmark, and then also Norway, the Baltic countries, of course. Of course, Turkey. So yeah, so all these countries are still with NATO. But as I said, there are gonna be some differences, and I'm gonna be addressing them. So just wait a minute, I have to color in all of this. Okay, right, so I'm gonna be stating some differences here. First of all, Belarus and Kazakhstan are NATO in this timeline because once again, in this case, they actually transition into democracies after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they opted to join NATO the same year as countries like Poland joined. So in 1999, if I don't remember it wrong. So yeah, these countries joined NATO around that year. Now, in this case, Ukraine and Georgia, they are west-leaning, but without Russia really looking as a threat, because Russia didn't even take Crimea and Donbass from Ukraine. They didn't even take Abkhazia and South Ossetia from Georgia. Instead, these countries gave autonomy to these regions. So yeah, these countries, Ukraine and Georgia, they're still left-leaning, but without Russia being as much of a threat as OTL, but still authoritarian, they still have the leader, Putin. Ukraine and Georgia don't really feel the need to join NATO. Now they're still gonna cooperate with the EU and things like that, but they're also gonna trade with Russia at the same time. So yeah, I'm not really sure if Ukraine and Georgia will be willing to join this war. And of course, with Russia not being as much of a threat and without them invading Ukraine, Sweden and Finland never really joined NATO. They still are neutral countries. Obviously, once again, West leaning. They're not gonna be Russian leaning. That just makes no sense. Also, another country is gonna be here. It's just like something like Bosnia and Herzegovina. Maybe they join NATO around the same time as Croatia did in OTL. And of course, Kosovo, they're not gonna be able to join. I mean, I don't even know if they're a NATO partner, but still, like, they're serious. Yeah, no. So yeah, this is the NATO alliance in this alternate timeline. They don't have Sweden and Finland, but they have Belarus, Kazakhstan, Bosnia. I don't really know how use. I don't know how useful it's gonna be Bosnia, but it's whatever. it's still another country, so it's still something. So yeah, so for now, I'm not really gonna be bringing in other countries, but other countries are definitely gonna be joining this. So yeah, let's begin with this. Brazil, they're gonna take French Guiana, no doubt in that. And also, Kazakhstan are surrounded by both Russia and China. So yeah, in Kazakhstan, I mean, sure, they may be pro-Western, they may have a better economy, but once again, they're still Kazakhstan. Like in comparison to Russia and China, like they're nothing. So yeah, I'm sorry, Kazakhstan, but yeah, let's see what is happening else. Now, without tension between NATO and Russia as high as LTL, these areas they kind of still have troops, they still kind of fortified, but like less in comparison to LTL. So yeah. Anyways, we're gonna say that NATO's gonna be able to take Kaliningrad. Russian troops, they're gonna begin crossing here into the Baltics. They're gonna take the Estonian capital, but at this point, NATO troops are obviously beginning to arrive. So yeah, once again, there's that. And they're obviously not gonna begin invading into parts of Belarus, beginning to be closer to Minsk. At this point, the first country that is neither part of NATO or BRICS is gonna get involved, and it's actually Russia invading Georgia to get into Turkey. Yeah, this may cause Ukraine, who has a similar policy to Georgia in this moment, to join NATO, but Russia is not really interested in invading Ukraine because I mean they can go through here, but in Georgia they needed to go to get through Turkey. So yeah, they're gonna invade in Georgia. I mean Georgia. I mean they may have not really expected this. And Armenia is obviously gonna join this, which causes Azerbaijan to join. Well, the thing is that the troops may have been ready to invade Azerbaijan, and some Russian troops are already stationed in Armenia. Iceland Turkey is holding a defensive line. Of course, some Turkish troops that may have been sent toward this area here, they are now gonna have to return to their country to like fight against Russian troops. So yeah, it was overall in Russia's strategy this thing, but there is gonna be a country that is gonna be joining the war on the blue team, and that is Iran. Now in this case, I mean, they could have also remained neutral because they do have good relations with Saudi Arabia, but still they are more Western leaning to Saudi Arabia. So yeah, Iran is gonna choose to join this on the blue side. They're gonna begin to help Azerbaijan, even though, yeah, okay, they're gonna begin to help Azerbaijan and also Turkey. At this point, the red team feels like that they need to have some countries on their side. So yeah, let's see what's gonna happen. They're gonna bring in Mongolia, and that's just like to make the Russian and Chinese troops manage to go to their respective places easier. Anyways, now this is gonna be interesting. Because we allow these countries to remain left wing. I mean, they still are more aligned with the US, but they also do have some sympathy towards BRICS. So yeah, I don't really know how that is gonna work. Let's talk about Pakistan. Now in this case, Pakistan, they actually were more democratic during the Cold War, so they didn't really cultivate ties with China. And in fact, China does claim this area, just like they claim this area in LTO. And this actually brought Pakistan and India closer in this timeline. But, Pakistan may still have some ties with Russia. And, Pakistan is going to be neutral. In this case, not really because of China, but because they're cultivating ties with Russia. So Pakistan are going to neutral. Same thing for Afghanistan. They don't really see a point of joining this. Central Asia, I mean, look, they're not going to be joining. That's just out of the question for them. But there are going to be some countries here in Southeast Asia that are going to join. These countries are Taiwan, obviously, then also Korea and Japan, the Philippines, also Vietnam. In this timeline, Thailand is called Siam instead. Siam, they're gonna stay out of this war. Burma, same thing, yeah. Myanmar is called Burma. In this case, they actually kept their regional names somehow. But Australia and New Zealand, they're gonna be joining this war on the blue team, so on the side of NATO. So NATO, has gained some pretty powerful countries, they are gonna be able to distract China in the Pacific theater. But the red team may be planning something on this area. Yeah, for now we're gonna see how this is gonna play out. So first of all, China, they're gonna begin invading Taiwan. But once again, Taiwan actually is prepared to like resist a Chinese invasion even in LTL. So they're gonna be able to hold out for now and even push back just in some areas. Chinese troops are gonna be pushing into Korea, but once again, like this Korea is pretty powerful, you know. So there are already Korean troops here at the border. Japan is obviously gonna go in a conquest, you know, to reconquer their fair lands, you know, the Coral Islands, you know, in Sakhalin. And that are gonna immediately, you know, send reinforcements mostly to Korea, but they're also gonna send reinforcements to Taiwan. Same thing for the Philippines. Also, they may have to worry about this. But Asia, they're kind of like doing their thing. They're probably sending troops like to India and like maybe this guy causing Iran. They'll set that straight. And in that case, Iran, instead of using it against the West Indonesia, they're using it against the East Indonesia, you know, the Strait of Hormuz. China, they're gonna be crossing into Vietnam, but we know what China and Vietnam are like, and we also know what Vietnam is like, so they're gonna be able to hold out, obviously. Yeah, Kazakhstan, I'm sorry for you, but yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. Russian troops are gonna push more here into Turkey. They're also gonna be able to capitulate most of Azerbaijan, but there's still some Iranian and Turkish troops in these areas. Russia, they're gonna be able to take this land here of the Baltics, but at this point they're beginning to get stuff, like even as they're beginning to get near Minsk, you know, Belarus capital. NATO troops are finally arriving, but this is when something, you know, shocking happens. And we are gonna be having BRICS being able to convince some of these left-leaning countries to join their side. These are the countries. Yeah, this is not good because obviously those countries, you know, are powerful in military, you know, especially like Chile. So the West is gonna try to get some of these countries to join, and you know, they're actually gonna get these countries, as I said. Colombia, in this case, they kept their left-leaning government, but they are gonna be pressured by the US to join their side. Venezuela, once again, they have a democratic government here, so they are gonna join the West side. Same thing for Guyana. Considering them, they declare neutrality. But at this point, also Peru is gonna join the war. Bolivia, they declare neutrality. And same thing also for Ecuador. So yeah, that happened. So now the US is also gonna try to get some of these other countries to join in. You know, they're actually gonna be able to get Costa Rica as well as Belize. Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico all declare neutrality, and even Panama, even though the US really wanted Panama to join, you know, because of the Panama Canal, but unfortunately they are not gonna join. So yeah, so neither side really knows if what happened here is gonna go in favor of the West, so NATO, or in the favor of BRICS. We'll have to see. So first of all, Brazilian troops are gonna like begin to invade into the southern area of Guyana, sitting also for some parts of Venezuela. But we are gonna be having Colombian troops beginning to cross here into parts of Peru, as well as parts of Brazil. Also, Argentina at this point will be able to take these islands. Let me tell you that. Anyways, the West is gonna retaliate by what the BRICS did, you know, by putting the putting by you know putting the trigger to these countries. Israel is gonna join. Same thing also for Iraq and Jordan. And we are also actually gonna be having Yemen joining on this. So yeah, the West really pull a reverse card here. And one thing like Iraq and Jordan. Why did they join the blue team? Well, their dynasty, the Hashemites, is historically didn't really have any good relation with the Saudi dynasty. Now, at the present day of this timeline, the relations are repairing. They are allies, you know, they're all monarchies, so they do tend to get along. But still, there's still some of their rivalry, you know, and also excuse me. Also, historically, these countries were more West-leaning than Saudi Arabia itself. Like actually, Saudi Arabia actually rejoiced when the Iraqi monarchy got overthrown. So yeah, so these countries are actually a lot more Western leaning than these countries. So yeah, they joined the blue side. Syria and Lebanon, they declared neutrality. Same thing for like countries like Kuwait. Now Yemen to join once again. Also here Yemen, they kept the monarchy and they still reunified under the monarchy after the end of the Cold War. And once again, also this dynasty, the dynasty in the of the Yemen monarchy, they historically didn't really have good relations with Saudi Arabia. Also because during World War II, Saudi Arabia was with the Allies. You know, they supported the Allies. They supported the Allies even though they didn't join World War II, or they joined it like when it was about to end. Well, the Yemeni monarchy actually has sympathies towards, fascist Italy. And once again, those relations are repaired today. You know, they do get along well. They really kind of got along well during the Cold War, but still, there's still some of the rivalry. So Yemen is gonna take the opportunity to join the West against Saudi Arabia. Oman, they're gonna declare neutrality. Now Qatar. Qatar is a complex one. Now, they still have some issues with Saudi Arabia in this timeline. They still have ties with both the West, and the East. Okay, but in this case, it's not like they have ties with the East because of ties with Iran. Because once again, Iran here doesn't have the Islamic regime; it's a monarchy. Obviously, even here, Qatar and Iran are still allies, and Iran is on the blue team. So yeah, so Qatar is still have some ties with the West, to the degree which Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, the governments that they have in this island, to the degree of these countries, to the degree of these countries having ties with the East in this timeline. So it's less pro-Eastern in comparison to Seal. Yeah, for now, Qatar, they're gonna declare neutrality. Then we'll see what happens. But yeah, this new theater unit has been opened up for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. I mean, they actually didn't really expect this. I mean, they didn't expect Iran and even Israel, but like these countries, they didn't really expected that because they expected these countries to be neutral. Because also these countries, just like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, other than having ties with the West, they also have ties with Russia and China. So yeah, once again, they didn't really expect this. So yeah, so Israeli, Jordanian, Iraqi, Iranian troops, also some Iranian troops are all coming to this front line. And let me tell you, it's not gonna end well because there are also probably some Western troops already stationed in these countries because once again, the US, they have bases all over, all over the world. So yeah, it's not great. Let me tell you that. Now, Saudi troops are gonna be able to cross a little bit here into Yemen, but in this case, Yemen didn't really have any civil war, so they're gonna be able to sort of defend themselves. Once again, Saudi Arabia is still stronger. Yeah, but Saudi Arabia, they have to worry more about what's happening here. So yeah, so Saudi Arabia, they're gonna begin to send some troops here, and they're gonna be able to push back in some areas also about this one, because their capital is sort of there, so yeah, you don't wanna lose that. But that is obviously gonna make Yemen want to use guerrilla warfare, so they're gonna, begin to push back. And push back they do. Inside Arabia, they're gonna resend some troops. Yeah, they're not really gonna focus on this. They're focused on containing this threat. Anyways, China and Vietnam eventually become stalemated. China is able to take Taiwan, but a lot of guerrilla warfare. They're able to cross a little bit more into Korea, but once again, just like Vietnam, stalemate. And once again, like Australia and New Zealand, they are really focused on wiping out in Indonesia. I mean, if they are actually, they may actually be interested in wiping out Indonesia. Yeah, what was I saying? Because I mean, if you want to go to the Philippines, you have to go like that. You can go like that because it's Indonesian name. Yeah, they actually may actually want to wipe out Indonesia. So yeah, I'm gonna continue on the front lines here. Now, with the deflections, that the West is having, in these areas, Russia is gonna be able to push back, to push a little bit more. They're also gonna be able to repel all Western troops from Armenia and repush into these areas of Turkey now also into Iran, as well as taking over the rest of Azerbaijan. But Iran is not gonna be captured. But we are gonna be having Russian troops crossing more here into the Baltics. Once again, at this point, we are finally beginning to have NATO troops beginning to push back. And obviously, NATO troops are a lot more technologically advanced than Russian troops. So yeah, once again, it's not gonna end well. And anyways, here Colombian troops are gonna still push in. We're also gonna be having some US and Canadian troops beginning to arrive here, and they're gonna begin to push back in Venezuela and Guyana. So they're able to do some crossing into some of these areas of Brazil. But Brazil, they are gonna be able to push back in this area and begin to penetrate into Colombia. And obviously that's not good because there's Bogota like there, so yeah. Anyways, Australia and New Zealand and the Philippines, they're gonna begin to work on this. They're actually gonna pressure Malaysia to join the war and they're reduced on this area, so yeah. Australia, they're gonna begin to do island hopping. Also in this area here, they're gonna do island hopping. Yeah, turns out in Indonesia thought that they were really safe, so they were sending troops to India, China, and in other words, yeah, this island also says seats, and then there's the yeah, the pretty populous island, Java, with the capital Jakarta. It remains the only part of Indonesia, and eventually gets taken as well. Maybe the government is overthrown. At this point, they can send troops here, and there's also the U.S. Pacific Navy helping that. So yeah, let's see. Vietnam, they are now being able to really push back a lot. Taiwan is really liberated, also thanks to guerrilla warfare. Same thing for Korea, they're able to push back. And anyways, now Turkey and Iran are gonna begin to push back because some troops of these countries are also going to these areas and not only to these areas. Anyways, let's see what's gonna happen now. Yeah, they're pushing in. The holy sites are captured. I don't know how that is gonna be received throughout the Arab world. But anyways, yeah, they're gonna be able to kick the invaders out. At this point, they're beginning to go near Qatar, and Qatar actually makes the choice to actually join on the blue team. Interesting. And at this point, Iran is also gonna make a landing here. They're gonna take out Abu Dhabi, Dubai, these cities here. Yeah, and at this point, Saudi Arabia, they're screwed. Um, Riyadh will eventually be captured after a bloody fighting. I'm trying to speed run the video because it's probably gonna be 40 minutes, and Saudi Arabia will fall. Okay, what's gonna happen here instead? Well, I suppose that eventually there will be like a huge stalemate on the Chinese, Korean, and the Chinese-Vietnamese borders. South Africa, they're kind of doing their own thing. I don't know what's gonna happen here. Like, I suppose that then, like, the UK will maybe want to retake these islands, and like eventually some other troops will also be sent because probably the situation in the Eastern Front is probably stabilized. So which means that they're gonna be able to invade into some areas here of Brazil. And also they're eventually also gonna be able to push back on this area. At this point, it becomes a summer, because Russia is gonna use winter as an advantage. So yeah, this area becomes a stalemate, but eventually Western troops may focus on these areas, also using guerrilla warfare, and area will just fall. Here we may have some advances, but still not too much. Yeah, and the East kind of knows that eventually the West will be able to overpower them. Also because in general across the world there's more sympathy towards Nigeria because BRICS is technically the aggressor here. So yeah, so they kind of have got so yeah, we are actually gonna be having a peace treaty happening. So yeah, let's take a look at this peace treaty. I mean, also because at least when the West is exhausted, I mean, they fought all across the world. They're not Brazil. You are not gonna be able to invade that. South Africa. What point is there in invading that? India, China, Russia. You're not invading those. So yeah, there's gonna be a peace treaty being run up. Alright, so I'm gonna be drawing the lines and then I'll be explaining the peace treaty. Alright? Okay, so I think that's it. All right, so take a look at this peace treaty. The West mostly won. First of all, Colombia, they're gonna get some land out of Peru, Brazil. Venezuela will get some land out of Brazil. Guyana will get some land out of Brazil. French Guyana will expand a little bit into Brazil. But other than that, these countries don't really get any government changes. These islands, so Argentina, they're gonna remain British. And the dispute still isn't settled. South Africa, nothing really happened to them, just for reparations. Same thing for these countries that didn't really lose any land. Indonesia, they probably got the worst outcome, probably also along with Saudi Arabia. But yeah, we'll see. First of all, they lost some land to Malaysia, and this island is now part of the Philippines, interestingly enough. West Papua New Guinea is released, and Australia gets control over some of these islands. And also, this island here, Sumatra, they get their independence. So this when Indonesia is just this. And to probably get a new government. Actually, this part will probably also break away and just become Borneo. So yeah, this one Indonesia is just Java. Might as well just change the name to Java, of course. Yeah, Vietnam, Korea just got war reparations. Taiwan, they get the international recognition of being an independent country. You know, and then Japan, they're actually gonna get their claims here from Russia. Yeah, then going here in the, yeah, Saudi Arabia, they lost land to every country bordering them. You know, they lost land to Qatar, was expensive, just a little into the UAE. Yeah, the UAE didn't really actually lose anything, just that tiny strip of land. Yemen, they expanded here a little bit around the coast, but also a bit in the interior area. Jordan, they actually expanded a lot, getting some pretty valuable coastal land. Iraq just spent a little bit into the desert to like make their border, you know, it was like that. Yeah, now it's straighter. Israel probably just war operations and maybe also getting recognition from, you know, Saudi Arabia. Who knows? Who knows what Israel wants in this world? Iran, once again, probably just war operations. So, you know, same thing as Israel. Azerbaijan, they got their exclave connected now by taking over the Till of Armenia. Other than that, nothing really happened to Armenia. They still exist. The government may actually be more pro-West, and by that I mean more pro-Turkish and pro-Azerbaijani, more pro-Azeri. How do you say that? Yeah. Georgia, they just get war reparations. Same thing for the countries here, they didn't get any land. Same thing for like the US, you know, Western Europe. We know it. Kaliningrad will be partitioned between Poland and Lithuania, and of course Russia and China. You know, all the BRICS countries are forced to pay war reparations. But Russia and China, they actually had one victory, and you can even see it on this map. Basically, Kazakhstan, you know, was occupied by BRICS throughout the World War, you know, and basically they kind of exchanged that, you know, in exchange of the West getting these victories. Kazakhstan, they're gonna have to leave NATO, and who knows if also the EU, and you know, the government may actually be more non-aligned, like still leaning more towards the West, you know, but also in favor of also having ties with Russia and China at this point. So yeah, the West, you know, they lost ground on Central Asia, says, you know, Kazakhstan at this point they are more non-aligned, but still for the most part the West did win. I mean, Peru didn't really lose anything. Brazil, I mean, they're still here, you know. So yeah, I'll guess that the country will, like, of course, the only NATO country we lost here is just Kazakhstan. I'll say like the Western countries actually getting along are like Malaysia, Taiwan, just because they got recognized internationally. Maybe Jordan in Yemen also gain something. I mean, Kaliningrad is a valuable port, so Poland also probably gain something. And I'll say like of course the Eastern countries just got it worse, so like just Saudi Arabia and Indonesia, like especially Indonesia, like Indonesia just got like slaughtered, like the you know Australia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, you know they took a knife and they went for Indonesia's land, like if you know what I mean. Of course, I'm joking. Like, don't think of it badly. Uh, So yeah, this was the scenario I wanted to do today. I hope I didn't forget mentioning or doing something that I actually planned to do because, like I said, once again, I had this video plan ever since some days ago. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. At this one, it's 15 minutes. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one tomorrow, which is gonna be a different version of this video. I really hope it won't be seen as repetitive, but rather interesting. Like I'll be mentioning how this could happen, in a different way. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.